thank you so much for joining us this morning to have a chat. And of course, you two, obviously, like you played against each other, didn't you, Alex?
Scarlets, yes.
Yeah, Scarlets a few times when you were at the Ospreys and for Wales as well.
Yeah, you went up against each other.
Well, he doesn't have the big blonde locks that you had back then as well. I always stayed well clear when I saw the blonde hair coming my direction.
Look at you there. Look at that hair.
My Pat Sharp days.
That was back when Rory Best even had hair. Look at that. I mean, that's really going back.
That is going back a while, yeah.
Listen, Alex, thank you so much for talking to us this morning. And listen, we're discussing a really serious topic at the moment, and your diagnosis of early onset dementia at the age of just 40. Can you talk to us about the diagnosis, or even at what stage, what happened that forced you and your wife, Mel, to have to go and get a checkup?
Well, at first, I was most probably in denial, putting it down to stress with everyday life. But I was struggling with short-term memory, having conversations with Mel, an hour later, having no recollection. My concentration was getting worse with even reading emails and not being able to take the information in and then reply. I was paying wrong people in work and sending bank transfers to the wrong companies. I was really struggling in group situations when lots of people were talking to take in the information. So I was coming out of board meetings with work and things like that, thinking, what was all that about? And as I said, I was putting that down to just everyday stress. But then I went on a bike ride, and it's a bike ride I've done over 100 times, and I had a blackout moment on this bike ride, and this was September 2019, and I phoned my wife and was pretty shook up. She said, cycle home the way you've just come from, and then went to the doctors the following morning.
Alex, you know, you're talking about these little things that happened, and you said that you're kind of denying it. But at the same time, you were so young, in your 30s and early 40s, when this is going on. So was it something that you just didn't think that it possibly could be early onset dementia? Or because you're a rugby player and you knew that this was something that was happening within the sport that people were talking about, that you did know that it was a possibility?
It wasn't being talked about then. This was two and a half years ago. It's only the last really 18 months since myself, Steve and Michael Littman went public with our news. So, I just, as I said, I thought it was stress, but I wanted to get checked out because I was struggling more day to day with the simple things that you take for granted, but weren't as easy for me.
Listen, I played for 14 years professional rugby as well, Alex, and I know how far the concussion protocols have come now, but think back to, it was probably a little bit more lax in the early days, and I was reading you talk about back in the 90s, you know, maybe there was no protocols. I mean, what do you think the changes have been made in that space of time, and do you see that there's going to have to be a raft of new changes being made?
Yeah, I think... at least we're talking about it now. In our day, it was taken as a bit of a joke. In video analysis, if anybody got knocked out and was walking around like Bambi, we used to rewind it and watch it again, and everybody within the room would be laughing. And it was, if it happened in training or in a game, you would just have sniffing salts and carry on. Now, yes, there are protocols, the HIA, but I'm part of a lobby group called Progressive Rugby, and it's every stakeholder in the game. We love rugby, but we still believe it's not safe enough, even with the return to play protocols that are currently in place.
When we're talking, because you've playing since you were like 4 years old, and you know, obviously when you're younger, it's meant to be non-contact, but it gets to be contact at some stage. We've all seen young kids play rugby. But also, during your career, you were talking to your doctor. Can you talk to me about the sub-concussive space that you got? What does that mean?
So again, I've learned all this because I thought a concussion was when you were knocked out cold. But 90% of concussions are where you're not knocked out. And subconcussive hits are literally every contact that you receive, not just to your head, but to your body. And your brain inside your skull rattles round, and each contact is causing a little bit of damage. And that's how we worked out over my 14-year professional career. I had 100,000 subconcussions. When I started playing at 4, there was contact allowed then as well. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. These numbers soon add up, and that's why with what we're lobbying with Progressive Rugby, they have brought guidelines in of 15 minutes per week, but they need to make that mandatory. I'm speaking to players who went on the Welsh tour in the summer, and the Welsh team met for 6 weeks before going to South Africa, and I know they weren't doing the 15-minute guidelines of contact per week.
Yeah, I mean, and we see the game, it's so physical, the intensity as well. Do you still love the game, Alex? I mean, whenever you get this...
I still love rugby. Rugby's been my life, as I said, since the age of 4. I just think that we can do so much more during the week to make the game safer. I think the season is too long. We're in a 10, 11-month season, and the players haven't got the rest for their bodies, but also their brains in between season. I think that needs to be reduced massively. But also, as I keep saying, what we do in the week is what we can control, and let's limit the amount of contact players, make it mandatory. The NFL brought in mandatory contact in training 13 years ago, and rugby still hasn't. I
mean, how are you now, Alex? I mean, because I read an article with your wife, and I mean, the fear that she had, you know, you've got a young daughter and 2 older kids as well. Like, she was fearing that you won't be around to see her grow up. You might have to be in a home. I mean, it must be very frightening.
Yeah, as we said before we come on here, things have got easier since knowing, because I don't overcommit now with what I'm doing during the day with work or anything like that. I'm training for an Ironman in September. I'm eating a great diet. I've been away for experimental treatment, and things are better than where they were.
We know young children who are teenagers who really want to be professional rugby players, who train all the time. They're training like they're adults and their bodies are still growing and they're trying to prove themselves. Do you think they're paying attention to what it is that you and players are like you that are saying, going, this, you know, your career is short and you're going in for those massive hits, that they have to be more careful?
Yeah, I just think because the education is better, it can improve. I just think they've got to respect that injury when it happens, and it's more serious than pulling your hamstring or having a knee construction. You've got to give it the time to heal. And we were told, the only thing I think I can remember about concussion, were you feeling sick? No. If you weren't feeling sick, you carried on. There's a lot more now advice out there, but just listen to your body. And the next game, if you're not feeling right, sit it out and don't come back, and don't go back into training until you're feeling 100%.
Yeah, I think that is something that's, you've seen that. And it's not up to the young players, because the young players all want to play the matches. And when you do have a hamstring injury, it's easy to diagnose, right, you're going to be out for 4 or 5 weeks. But with a head injury, it's very hard for you to stand up in front of your coach or in front of your doctor and say, I'm not feeling right. But I think that people like yourself coming on and being so open about this will just bring more awareness to it. And it's up to the coaches and the doctors and the parents to realise that something's not right and to take that time out.
Well, 100%. It needs to be taken out of the players' hand. Players are gladiators. They want to be on the pitch and play and performing. They don't want somebody else taking their spot. But if you know you've had a concussion, and I don't like the word concussion, I think we should call it what it is. It's a traumatic brain injury. And we got to get away from calling it a concussion or a sports concussion, because it dumbs down actually what's going on. But if it's taken out of the player's hands, the player's going to be in a much better place going forward.